Have I said Carmen enough yet? Well, I'm not done! Hello, friends! In honor of one of my favorite games, Persona 5 Royal, finally being ported to consoles outside of PlayStation, I wanted to ring in what will hopefully be the Persona 5 Renaissance with a video covering a brief history and background of the first personas of the main characters in the series. We're going to cover the first personas of each character who has one in Persona 5, Persona 5 Royal, and Persona 5 Strikers. If you haven't played these wonderful games, especially Royal or Strikers, and would still like to, I encourage you to come back to this video after your playthroughs because there will be major spoilers throughout this video. With all that being said, let us start the game. Akira Kurusu, Ren Amamiya, the frizzy hair guy, whatever you want to call him, we'll just call him Joker for this video. Joker's first persona is Arséne. Arséne is based on fictional character Arsène Lupin, created by French writer Maurice Leblanc. Lupin is known as a gentleman thief, a very dapper and well-mannered charmer of sorts, but also a noted master of disguise. He doesn't rely on brute force or extreme physical altercations for thievery, but sheer wit and skill. Though Lupin is a thief, he fights for good, albeit on what many would consider the wrong side of the law. He was first introduced in a collection of short stories in French magazine Je sais tout, the first of which being The Arrest of Arsène Lupin in 1905. Lupin was featured in several works in the years since, one of the more notable ones being a crossover story featuring none other than Detective Sherlock Holmes. But after a legal tiff with Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of the famous detective, the character's name was changed to Sherlock Sholmes. After this first appearance, the adapted detective character appeared in two more stories alongside Lupin in a battle of the wits, tangled in the push and pull of justice by the rules and justice by the means. Morgana, or Mona's first persona, is Zorro. Zorro is based on, well, Zorro, a fictional character created by writer Johnston McCulley, appearing in a variety of different works, but debuting in McCulley's novel The Curse of Capistrano. He's portrayed as a quite dashing vigilante, donned in a black costume with a matching hat and mask obscuring the top half of his face. Zorro is known for his cunning wit, charm, and skill. In fact, he's so skilled, authorities are often too slow and bumbling to catch him. This is something he takes great pleasure in, as he is consistently thrilled to humiliate them for their ignorance in catching him. Zorro is actually an alias for his true identity, Don Diego de la Vega, son of a rich Californian landowner. As a nobleman by birth, Zorro defends the weak against reigns of corrupt tyranny and general evildoers. Much like Arsène Lupin, Zorro also doesn't favor brute force against his opponents, but takes it a step further than Lupin as he makes use of teasing and mockery to irritate and distract them. On top of his intelligence and skilled combat maneuvers, Zorro is a profound navigator, which allows him to easily infiltrate structures as well as escape them when his work is finished. Ryuji Sakamoto, or Skull's first persona, is Captain Kidd. Captain Kidd is based on Captain William Kidd, who was a Scottish privateer turned pirate who lived during the 17th century. In 1689, Kidd became a member of a French-English pirate crew sailing the Caribbean at the behest of Captain Jean Vantin. In September of the same year, his voyage to the Cape of Good Hope experienced many issues, including sickness and dwindling funds. When the going got tough, much of Kidd's crew abandoned him for other ventures. Nearly 10 years later, Kidd, a now more stable and seasoned captain, experienced the beginning of his downfall. While talking with fellow captain Thomas Parker, Kidd's crew, supposedly without his knowledge, plundered a neutral trading ship known as the Mary, harming crew members and stealing treasures and items aboard. It's said that when he found out what his crew had done, Kidd was livid and forced his men to return the stolen goods. Being branded a criminal once again after losing his letter of marque from the King of England, Kidd's voyages and exploits became narratives of legend until his ultimate capture and demise. On Takamaki, or Panther's first persona, is Carmen. Carmen is based on Carmen, a fictional character from the novella Carmen. That's peak scriptwriting right there. Created by Prosper Mérimée, which later inspired the well-known opera of the same name by French composer Georges Bizet. She was depicted as a strong-willed, capricious Romani woman with the ability to charm any man who crossed her path. Soldier Don José meets Carmen at a cigar factory, and from there, their lives intertwine to both of their eventual respective downfalls. It was clear from the get-go that Carmen wasn't serious about Don José in any way and merely saw him as a pastime from her boredom. After many quarrels, Carmen expresses her fading feelings for the soldier, but Don José wasn't one to take no for an answer at that point. After an ominous promise that they would indeed meet again, he attempts once more to win her over. After her final rejection, Don José takes her life as predicted in their fortunes, but not before Carmen communicates one of her most memorable messages in that she was born free and free she will die. Carmen will always be free. Yusuke Kitagawa, or Fox's first persona, is Goemon. Japanese outlaw hero Ishikawa Goemon was first touched upon in the 1642 biography of samurai and daimyo Totoyomi Hideyoshi, who simply referred to him as a thief. Why, you may ask? Well, Goemon prided himself on stealing from the rich and giving to the poor, much like the Western outlaw Robin Hood. Unfortunately, not much is known of Goemon's earlier years, and there are several versions of his background. While there's not much in the way of historical accounts of Ishikawa Goemon, stories and his legend have carried on through retellings, supposed accounts, film adaptations, and of course, kabuki theater performances. Thankfully, we do have a few popular tellings of his story, with one of them recounting his birth as Sanada Kurunoshin in 1558. As the son of a samurai family in servitude to the Miyoshi clan, he was orphaned by the Ashikaga shogunate and swore revenge. He trained under his master until he was forced out when it was discovered that Goemon had a scandalous romance with one of his master's mistresses. But not before he stole a sword, one of his master's prized possessions. As the tales of his endeavors gained traction and popularity, many even started crediting him with several anti-authoritarian acts in Japanese history, such as the assassination attempts against Oda Nobunaga and Totoyomi Hideyoshi mentioned earlier. Makoto Nijima, or Queen's first persona, is Johanna. Johanna is based on Pope Joan, who, according to legend, was the first and only female pope. Whether or not she actually existed is still debated by scholars today, but legends tell of her impressive intellect and natural talent. First accounts of Pope Joan arose in the 13th century, and much like many others we've discussed, her story and background have many versions. Most iterations of her story have similar points in common, such as her impressive rise through the church hierarchy through her talent, willpower, and superior intellect, leading to her election as Pope in 855. Now, you may be wondering how a woman, even one with such prowess as Pope Joan, came to power in the 13th century. Well, it's because it's said that she disguised herself as a man, her thick and lengthy holy robes making it a fairly easy effort. Legend says that Pope Joan's secret was discovered after she gave birth, with some saying it was during a papal procession, and she shortly passed afterward, her death remaining suspect. It should be noted that there are little to none reliable accounts or references to her existence and her reign. Some historians and scholars believe that she did indeed reign, but it was later expunged from Vatican records. Unfortunately, we may never know the whole truth of the story of Pope Joan. Futaba Sakura, or Oracle's first persona, is Necronomicon. Necronomicon is based on the fictional text Necronomicon, also referred to as Al-Azif, or the Book of the Dead. The Necronomicon appears in many of H.P. Lovecraft's works, such as At the Mountains of Madness and The Hound. In these works, the Necronomicon is a grimoire, or a tome that tells the truth of the quote-unquote ancient ones, that once and still may inhabit Earth and have a heavy-handed influence on the humans they scrutinize. The fictional author of this forbidden text is Abdul al-Hazred, a recurring character in Lovecraft's tales. His tome is also said to contain spells and incantations for summoning these ancient deities, as well as containing forbidden knowledge revealing the words of these ancient ones. But those who read it are at risk of going insane for receiving knowledge they may or may not be able to handle. Beyond insanity, it's said that those who delve into the Necronomicon are sure to meet a bad end. And that didn't exclude the fictional author, for Alhazred, I'll spare you the details, perished to a supposed invisible monster in broad daylight. Now, I'm sure that I said the word fiction many times in the preceding section, but I'd like to take an extra moment to clarify that this text is indeed fictional. Since the 1930s, there have been endless amounts of rumors that the Necronomicon is a real historical text. This may be due to the notoriety of the origin stories, which led to many authors and publishers referencing and republishing for many years, and even to this day. Haru Okumura, or Noir's first persona, is Milady. Milady is based on Milady de Winter from Alexandre Dumas' The Three Musketeers. In the book, she is a French spy hired by Cardinal, I'm gonna butcher this name, Richelieu? Yeah, we'll go with that, to blackmail Queen Anne by seducing her secret lover, the English Prime Minister, the Duke of Buckingham. She attempted to do this by stealing a pair of diamond studs from him, which were gifted by Queen Anne. This makes Milady one of the primary and most compelling antagonists in the story. Much like Carmen, Milady is considered a fair example of a femme fatale, as her gentle exterior covers a much more sinister, manipulative, and cunning inner truth. Her underhanded tactics and manipulation throughout the book land her as both a skilled spy and bitter assassin of sorts. It's revealed in the novel that one of the musketeers, Athos, was actually married to Milady de Winter, but attempted to take her life when he discovered she was branded with a fleur-de-lis, the mark of a convicted criminal, and led a life that he was unaware of. This clash left both characters extremely resentful and revenge-driven, which ultimately leads to Milady's downfall and demise. Goro Akechi, or Crow's first persona, is Robin Hood. I think by now this goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway. Robin Hood is based on Robin Hood. There is endless history, literature, ballads, and tellings of the character Robin Hood. In fact, due to the popularity of the folktales, the term Robin Hood is consistently used to describe a rebellious hero against tyranny. Originally, he was depicted in Old English folktales, and the character grew and evolved into the consistent archetype we see today in TV and films. What almost all retellings agree on is that Robin Hood is a rebellious but good-hearted thief that steals from the rich and gives to the poor. Legends say that he was both an extremely skilled swordsman and archer, making him a fierce and unpredictable opponent. While most know him as the man who lives in Sherwood Forest, pining for the affections of his lover, Maid Marianne, with his band of merry men who never lets the Sheriff of Nottingham know a day's rest, there's actual suspected earlier mentionings of him, even as far back as the 13th century. Terms such as robhod and Robin Hood, which came to be phrases associated with criminals, were scattered amongst Old English legal records. Some scholars suspect that these terms could have been used as a general stock term for thieves and bandits. Hi. Thank you for joining Off-Script Mew, where I remind you that if you haven't played Persona 5 Royal, there are about to be 2 massive spoilers. So if you would still like to enjoy that game, I would recommend exiting the video now and returning later. I'll give you a minute. Pause for effect. Alright, here we go. Sumire Yoshizawa, or Violet's persona, is Cendrillon. Cendrillon is based on Cinderella and actually adopts the French name for the character, which also happens to be the name of the fairy tale opera by Jules Massenet. Now, if you think there are a lot of adaptations of Robin Hood, you haven't seen nothing yet. Cinderella, Cendrillon, Rhoda Peace, Le France, Yeshan, Sarantola, Aschenputtel. And that's not even mentioning the cinematic adaptations. Cinderella, 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 Cinderella. Alright, you get the joke. I'm not naming any more of these and you can't make me. Many authors have been credited with adapting the story over time, with one of the most notable ones being French author Charles Perrault, whose works also include Puss in Boots and Sleeping Beauty. The most popular versions of the story tell the basic tale of a quiet young woman struggling under the power and abuse of her stepmother and stepsisters. Cinderella wasn't even her actual name. It was a crude nickname given to her by her stepfamily because she was always covered in ash from sleeping next to the fireplace. From childhood, Cinderella was forced to toil away on her family's estate, constantly serving her stepfamily as their maid. In the kingdom where she lives, it's announced a ball will be held to find a bride for the kingdom's prince. While she is initially permitted to attend, her stepfamily sabotages her dress, leaving her in tears and tatters with no hope that she'll ever escape this life. In her saddest moment, her fairy godmother appears and conjures her a beautiful dress and horse-drawn carriage with a warning that the spell will only last till midnight. It was at the ball that Cinderella and the prince fall in love, but at the stroke of midnight, she runs off, leaving the prince with no name to remember her by and one single glass slipper. The prince visits nearly every house in the kingdom in hopes of finding his bride, but none have yet to fit the slipper. Finally arriving at her family's estate, her stepsisters fail to squeeze their feet into the shoe, but of course it fits Cinderella perfectly. And from there, they lived happily ever after. Arguably one of the best written characters in the Persona 5 series, or Takuto Maruki's first persona, is Azathoth. Azathoth is based on a truly horrific deity created by none other than H.P. Lovecraft. It's featured in works such as the Dream Cycle and Cthulhu Mythos stories. Also known as a primordial being of chaos, Azathoth was portrayed as ruler of time, space, and the outer gods, who convene at the center of infinity. Whatever that means. Oh, and it also has a horde of mindless, shapeless beings constantly dancing around it to, and I quote, the piping of demonic flute. Azathoth is also mentioned in Lovecraft's fictional text, the Necronomicon, and those that come across the mere mention of this being are left terrified. Since there are many depictions, descriptions, and interpretations of Azathoth, it's really difficult to settle on one. It's said that its form is almost too horrid to comprehend and describe, but that it's the ancestor to many more well-known deities and beings in the mythos such as Cthulhu and Yog-Sothoth. In the mythos, specifically in The Dreams in the Witch House, Walter Gilman wakes up recalling the sounds of wispy and monotonous flutes, and fears that he will meet his end, succumbing to the void of chaos, succumbing to the mindless rule of Azathoth. And not to spoil The Dreams in the Witch House for you, but if we've learned anything from Necronomicon's portion of this video, all who come in contact with it will meet a terrible end. So, good game, Walter. Sophia, or Sophie's first kind of persona, kind of not, but hey, we'll go with it, is Pithos. Pithos is unique as it's the only one in this list that isn't inspired by a real-life person or character. Pithos is the Greek word for a large earthenware jar, commonly used to store large quantities of food or liquids. Historians note that this type of pottery was used by populations throughout the ages that surrounded the Mediterranean. They also mention that some pithoi were used for ancient burials. Now, that last bit should indicate that these things were massive at times and couldn't be handled by a single person. It was often a team effort to move these large and heavy containers. Some even constructed harnesses and crane mechanisms to assist in this process. Now, you may be wondering, how does any of this tie to Sophia's pseudo-persona? If you've played Strikers, you know exactly where this is going. Hi, this is Off-Script Mew again. Thank you for joining me for the second and last commercial break where I indicate that there is a massive spoiler coming, so I will once again give you one last chance to exit this video and return later. Alright, full speed ahead. If anyone here is familiar with the myth of Pandora's box, let me drop a really interesting fun fact on you. The term box is actually a bit of a mistranslation, and in all reality, it should really be referred to as Pandora's Pithos. Yes, sickness, death, strife, and all the evils of the world were in all actuality contained inside a lidded jar. But I'm gonna have to stop there because the rest of Pandora's tale will be covered in a future video in this miniseries, so be sure to keep a lookout. Finally, last but not least, we can't forget about our oldest phantom thief. Zenkichi Hasegawa, or Wolf's first and only persona, is Vajean. Vajean is based on Jean Valjean, the main character from Victor Hugo's 1862 novel turned musical and film Les Miserables. The 2-hour musical, which I watched at least 10 times and not by choice. No, I will not provide any context to that statement. Alright, bear with me here as I try to summarize the protagonist's life from a 1,462-page novel. Jean Valjean served an almost 20-year-long prison sentence for stealing a loaf of bread to feed his sister's children and trying to escape. He's issued a certain passport which identifies him as a criminal and immediately isolates him wherever he goes, preventing him from earning an honest living and bouncing back from his time in prison. After a life-changing encounter with a kind-hearted bishop, Valjean turns his life around and takes up a new alias. Sometime later, he comes across a woman named Fantine, a single mother desperately trying to get by who left her daughter Cosette in the care of an unfortunately abusive family. Fantine eventually passes away, and Valjean has been once again arrested by Javert, a very committed, strict-to-the-law police officer that's been tracking Valjean. After some words with Javert, Valjean eventually saved Cosette from the abusive family, the Thénardiers, and they lived as father and daughter for the remainder of the story until his eventual demise. Okay, I know I glazed over quite a notable chunk of plot and narrative, but what's most important to note is that Jean Valjean is known for his sincere compassion and humanity, being all too familiar with an unfortunate life, but choosing to be selfless as an advocate for those in need. If you made it this far, thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, maybe subscribe and see what I get up to from time to time. As I alluded to earlier, this will be a part of a mini-series, so be on the lookout for part 2.